an original.
From Story Studio Network.
I'm Erin Trafford.
I'm Dave Trafford, and welcome to this episode of Canadian Forestry Can Save the World.
This is the podcast series where we explore the role the forestry industry can play in fighting climate change.
Yeah, we've been talking about the new, the emerging, the innovative technology that's going to help in that fight.
In this episode, we need to have a serious discussion about reducing our reliance on fossil fuels. And it's not as simple as you and I taking advantage of government subsidies to install heat pumps in our homes.
Wait a minute. You're picking on my heat pumps? They're all the rage right now.
No. I'm not picking on heat pumps. We actually have heat pumps in our house. They do a great job of both heating and cooling our house here in Nova Scotia. So before you get all fussy on us, let's just park that idea. We do need to come back to it. I want to come back, though, to the conversation we had about the importance of using the whole log. That was the last episode. So if you haven't listened to that one yet, stop this one and go back and listen to that one. How forestry companies and governments have been figuring out how to make use of all the wood that is harvested in the forest. Not only is that good for business, it's good for the forest, it's good for the environment too, because really this is a path toward lowering that reliance on fossil fuels. So let's do another quick refresher. A forest company goes into the bush and conducts its planned harvest. And the result is...
You're quizzing me?
You've been a bit quiet. I just want to make sure that you're paying attention. You might still be mad about the heat pump.
Okay. So, all right. What's the question?
All right. So the question is, what do we end up with after a harvest in the forest?
A bunch of logs.
Okay. I'll accept that answer. Good enough. So yeah, you end up with a bunch of logs, which are all ready for the sawmill. But immediately, that sets us up for a bit of a, can we say, round log, square peg problem.
Of course, a tree is round. So as soon as you cut it into lumber, which is, square or rectangular.
Once that log is milled for lumber, there's actually a lot of leftover wood.
You've got the ends that come off it and shavings, the sawdust, the wood chips, and other residues.
So what do they do with all the branches and the bark and the sawdust that doesn't go into that lumber or the pulp and paper?
Well, I talked to David Marshall at Resolute Forest Products. He actually has some answers.
David Marshall, Director of Public Affairs and Sustainability at Resolute Forest Products.
He's the Public Affairs and Sustainability Lead at Resolute. He says that leftover wood, that biomass, is a critical component in their forestry operations.
When we talk about biomass, we're referring to forest residues, manufacturing residues, scrap wood, byproducts. By and large, that's what we're talking about. And so biomass includes everything from residues from our woodlands operations, such as branches and bark from the harvesting process, or the residues and waste generated at our manufacturing sites.
And as we learned in the last episode, biomass has a wide range of applications and uses for things like agriculture, forest regeneration, and as fuel.
They span beneficial uses like energy recovery, agricultural land spreading, forest regeneration, and so forth.
Yeah, we learned that biomass is being processed into biofuel that can reduce the carbon intensity of gasoline and diesel. Some of it's being used for engineered wood product like oriented strand board. You see it everywhere. And there are other products that typically last longer than it takes for the forest to be harvested, regrow, and harvested again.
But the real benefit when we're talking about transitioning away from fossil fuels is using that biomass to generate heat and electricity.
Yeah, there are a number of benefits there. It's a cleaner alternative. It reduces the demand on the power grid. And there's a growing demand and market for biofuel. So it's good for the environment and the economy.
Bioenergy is a type of renewable energy with the potential to assist, of course, with climate change mitigation. And above and beyond that, bringing jobs to northern and remote communities.
In fact, Resolute and a number of other forestry companies have been using biomass that they produce to power their own mills and facilities.
And 3/4 of our fuel needs are actually derived from the same carbon neutral biomass. So the bark, the black liquor, and the biosolids from our manufacturing processes.
They're using the leftover bark, the biosolids, and something called black liquor. It's a byproduct produced when they process pulpwood into paper pulp. Now, using it as a fuel source not only keeps the toxins out of the lakes and rivers near the mill. In some cases, it fuels the majority of the on-site power needs at some of these facilities to the point where biomass, biofuels, are replacing fossil fuels.
We've actually been coal-free since 2014 at all of our facilities. I mean, we've got a number of facilities in the U.S., and so they were burning coal. But a big part of replacing the coal at those facilities was introducing biomass as the fuel source.
So a couple reasons to wave the flag here. First, biofuels have replaced fossil fuels at Resolute's mills and facilities.
And second, the biofuels are a renewable, sustainable resource, and in some situations can be carbon neutral.
Our biomass is carbon neutral because 100% of it is derived from forests that are regenerated and managed according to the principles of sustainable forest management.
It's only carbon neutral as long as the forest that provided that biofuel is being regenerated, which not only provides more biofuel, but captures carbon as it grows and matures.
There's no question when you burn a tree, it's generating carbon, but that carbon that it's generating is then being sequestered by a tree. And I mean, trees, young trees in particular, the ones that we are planting in harvested forest, for instance, are actually absorbing and capturing more carbon at a higher rate than an older tree would.
Okay, I feel like we're making some headway here. There is now a solid line linking forestry operations and products and our ability to move away from fossil fuel reliance.
And the better news is Resolute isn't simply using its biofuel to support its own operations.
We've actually got 6 cogeneration and thermal facilities in Ontario and Quebec.
They've built half a dozen cogeneration plants here in Canada.
An energy facility that not only is producing steam for use at the pulp and paper mill, but is also generating energy that we can send back onto the grid for a renewable energy use.
And the cool thing is they generate more power than they need to run the plants, so the surplus gets redirected to the power grid.
So that relieves pressure on the grid, which is great. But Resolute is also manufacturing and supplying biofuels to one of Ontario's larger power generation plants.
For instance, at our Thunder Bay pellet plant, what we're doing is producing annually 40,000 metric tons of wood pellets under an agreement with Ontario Power Generation to provide those wood pellets for generating power at the Atikokan power plant. So, I mean, there's a market, a regional market for the biomass being produced in northwestern Ontario. We didn't have to take those wood pellets very far from our woodlands operations in the north to our sawmill and then off to the power plant.
Biomass wood pellets fire the Atikokan plant north of Thunder Bay. The Atikokan plant is the first power generation plant in Ontario to be fueled 100% by biofuel.
Yeah, up until 2012, it was a coal-fired plant. Now, it was shut down, renovated, and reopened in 2014, burning biomass. And it generates enough energy to power about 70,000 homes annually.
And if you're now wondering what the effect has been after converting to biofuels, Atikokan produced nearly 1.2 million tons of greenhouse gas in 2004. The latest numbers we have from 2020 suggest the biofuel-powered plant emissions have been reduced to just over 17,000 tons. So if we do some quick math, that's more than a 98% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions in less than 20 years.
Atikokan's the largest biofuel plant in North America, and it runs on a renewable, sustainable wood product fuel source. And that brings us back to the first principle. Using the entire tree is foundational to making the forestry sector a model as a sustainable business, supporting a sustainable economy and a sustainable environment.
At the end of the day, we've used 100% of the tree to make lumber, to make pulp, to make paper, and of course to generate energy, all the while regenerating forests in a sustainable manner.
Makes it hard to argue that we can't possibly reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. The Atikokan model makes it clear that we can produce energy at scale in a way that's good for the economy, good for the climate, good for the forest.
Now, that's a good news story.
It is a good story. Fueling the Atikokan power plant with biofuels is another concrete example of government policy and private sector initiatives working together to do two things. Number one, dramatically reduce those carbon emissions. Number two, do so by transitioning away from fossil fuel.
Dare I say there's an energizing element to that story?
Okay. No more dad jokes. The grandkids are not here right now.
What's your problem? You look shocked. It's a powerful narrative.
Are you done yet?
Yeah, I'm good. Go ahead.
Okay. Because there's more that we need to talk about, and it's actually more good news. You'll remember we talked to Peter Holmgren in the last season of the podcast.
My name is Peter Holmgren. I'm a Swedish forester. Internationally, I've been working with the UN and I've been heading up the Center for International Forestry Research. For the past 5 years, I've been working mainly with the Swedish forest industry to develop their sustainability platforms, particularly related to climate.
Yeah, he's a somewhat outspoken forester in Sweden who has plenty to say about net zero targets and forestry role in battling climate change.
And if you haven't already done so, I know I keep saying this, but you need to go back and listen to all the other episodes of this podcast. This one we're talking about was episode 9 of season 1. And we look at how other countries, other than Canada, are approaching the climate change battle and how forestry fits into that strategy.
Now, considering Sweden's climate, there are a number of things we can learn from the Nordic countries,
including the use of something called district heating. Simply put, the wasted heat generated by commercial or industrial operations is used to heat water that's distributed across a community or a city through a network of pipes, kind of similar to the way natural gas is distributed to homes here in North America.
And that heat can also be deliberately generated by power plants powered by...
You guessed it, biofuel.
Yeah, and to that point, where district heating fueled by biofuels have been all but eliminated. They've all but eliminated the use of gas or heating oil to heat homes and businesses in parts of Sweden.
Peter Holmgren says this move toward bioenergies and away from fossil fuels didn't happen overnight.
It became an objective after the oil crisis in the 70s. That's what kicked a lot of things in a lot of policies forward. Including the bioenergy solutions. And then we've had I think it really picked up pace late 80s, early 90s. And since then, it has been a gradual development. It's not as if it wasn't from one day to another, but it's been a very long and gradual process.
And the district heating network in Sweden has matured over the past 3 or 4 decades because of government commitment to bioenergies.
In Sweden, particularly, this has been a political movement over the past 30, 40 years to invest in district heating in almost every city in the country, and the forests are all around. So you get some economy into this, and that's why these days 40% of the Swedish energy supply is bioenergy. very much to do with this, and we've phased out oil for heating almost completely.
40% of Sweden's energy supply is bioenergy, and they've all but phased out the use of fossil fuels for heating.
So if they can do it in Sweden, why not here in Canada?
Why not indeed? Meet Jean Blair.
Jean Blair. I'm the Director of Planning and Outreach at Torchlight Bioresources.
And Tom Antle.
My name is Tom Antle. I work for Torchlight Bioresources, and I'm the Director of Engineering.
They both work with Torchlight Bioresources.
And I had the chance to talk to them recently about a district heating project they're leading in New Glasgow, Nova Scotia.
The Energy Centre, the supplier of the heat, is based around a biomass combined heat and power plant, so that both generates electricity and provides the heat. And the way that we've built it is that there's also, of course, backup boilers, backup heaters, just in case something would happen. So we've designed it so that if any one system goes down, any one boiler goes down, it's a secure source of heat. This isn't out of line with other designs around the world. So it's based around the combined heat and power plant for most of the year, which would supply about 80% of the heat. And then on top of that, there'd be about another 19% from biomass heat-only boilers. So that's kind of a cheaper way to provide a little extra heat. And then on the very top of that is propane boiler. So that's to provide heat on the very coldest days of the year, and if anything should happen to any of the other boilers. So that provides a vanishingly small amount of the actual energy, but provides a very important kind of resiliency piece there. What we found through kind of massaging the design and fitting the plant to its local conditions is that we can make the electricity revenues more or less pay for the entire heat supply, which means that the heat entering the network is very low cost. We've compared it to a bunch of the existing heating systems, so heating oil, air source heat pumps, baseboard electric heating. There's a very little bit of natural gas there. So we've compared it to all those, and it comes out more or less cheaper than all of them.
And when you say you're generating the electricity, that's to power the plant, right?
Well, no. So it powers the plant, but it generates a significant excess. So it is, in fact, a power plant, combined heat and power plant. So it generates around 16 megawatts of electricity, which is not a huge plant in the scale of Nova Scotia, but in the scale of New Glasgow, it generates more electricity than the town would need. So it would be exported to the local grid.
And I think, again, back to sort of the innovation in this, Gene, that I hear is the economic development that we wouldn't have otherwise had. So the innovation doesn't necessarily have to be in reducing the carbon emissions. It's an economic development or a business development innovation that we never had access to before.
Absolutely. And certainly from the town's perspective, I mean, the decarbonization is obviously is a benefit and something they're interested in, but the primary driver from the municipality's perspective is addressing energy poverty. Energy affordability, affordability of living in general is a very big concern in New Glasgow and across Nova Scotia. So from the municipality's perspective, that affordability piece and addressing energy poverty, trying to help make sure that the residents don't need to choose between heating their home and putting food on the table is probably the most important aspect as far as they're concerned. Combined with, they recognize the important role that the forest sector plays in their community. There was something like 80 families in the community were directly employed by the pulp mill, which is currently shut down and may or may not reopen. So they're very much aware of the economic impact that has had on their community and just that important role that the forest sector plays. So certainly for them, there's both the energy affordability and the prospect of generating economic development throughout the region are probably the two biggest drivers for moving this project forward, along with just that idea of investing in generational infrastructure. Like they want to do something for their town that is going to leave a lasting impact, that it's going to have benefit not just for the next 5 years, but for the next 50, 70 more years, and putting those bones in place to be able to do that now. So again, that's sort of something that we don't always see from various levels of government, that sort of forward thinking, wanting to leave that legacy. it's a bit of a shift in mindset, but certainly something that sort of needs to happen along with this energy transition, is thinking not just 5 years down the road, but 75 years down the road.
We're talking to New Glasgow in particular is, for example, the mayor said, 100 years ago, a group of people came together to build a dam to provide drinking water to the community. And that's one of the reasons that the community is still here. And the mayor and the council see this type of project as similarly impactful going into the future.
It's transformational. It's not, right?
Yeah.
That's the key to that. You have to have that transformation to have the legacy. So take me back to the nuts and bolts. Clearly, they thought it was a good idea because they've invested in the idea. How did this germinate, particularly in New Glasgow?
We approached a few different municipalities. We are targeting Nova Scotia in large part because they do not have low-cost natural gas, so heating alternatives are very expensive. There's a high carbon grid, so heat pumps are a great alternative. There is a great deal of privately owned forests, which makes the wood supply a little bit simpler, but also a little bit more impactful from sort of a regional development point of view. So all of those factors sort of came together as to why Nova Scotia. Oh, and the fact that there's a lot of fiber available there. So 2 large pulp mills have shut down in, a small province that only had 3 pulp mills to begin with. They now have a major issue with sort of markets for their low-grade wood fiber, and a government that's saying, wanting to transition to more active forest management, or ecological forestry is another word for it. So to do that in a way that operators can still make money, there needs to be an outlet for that low-grade wood. So for all those reasons, Nova Scotia was sort of a good target province. And then within Nova Scotia, we approached a few different municipalities. New Glasgow actually has the highest population density, or building density, outside of the 2 cities of Halifax and Sydney, so that helps. But I think the most important thing was that there's a mayor and a CAO that are very ambitious and jumped right on the idea and said, yes, this is something we have to do. We want to do something that's going to leave this lasting impact for our community. Yes, it's a big undertaking, but we need to do something. We need to make something happen. So it's really their ambition and excitement about it that has landed us there.
So as we record this episode, the New Glasgow project is still in the feasibility phase. The town's website says the study will look at the biomass supply impacts and cost, an overview of ownership options and preliminary utility plan, and an estimation of the capital cost and delivered heat cost.
Yeah, while we're considering the obvious decarbonization benefits of district heating, the matter of cost and affordability, front and center for the residents and the town council in New Glasgow.
What's really important to look at is what's the actual delivered cost of heat per person, per household, per year.
Now, the question is, does that large capital investment to retrofit the town's infrastructure and build a biofuel power generation facility make sense?
Consider New Glasgow has a population of just under 10,000 residents.
We estimate that the town's spending around $28 million a year on heating fuel for a town of 10,000 people. And we think that the cost of the district heating system would be around $20 million. So undoubtedly a large capital cost, but substantial savings year to year.
The Torchlight research suggests the town could realize an annual energy savings of more than 28%.
Yeah, that's an important thing to remember here is the heat and the energy costs are a community cost. And in the case of New Glasgow, the infrastructure and delivery service would be owned by the community.
Which brings me right back to the point I made off the top of the show. Doing our part to fight climate change in a meaningful way is not actually as simple as just taking advantage of government subsidies and installing a heat pump. That puts the onus on individuals, where district heating and that approach is literally about everyone doing it together.
A much more equitable solution than, saying to everybody, oh, you got to put a heat pump in your home. It's, we're going to invest in this infrastructure as a municipality, or maybe as a cooperative, or whatever the ownership structure is, but it's not typically, the homeowners putting in money out of their own pocket to achieve a decarbonized heating solution.
I think we're so used to talking about decarbonization on a personal level, like your carbon footprint, what can you do in your house? But that's really the opposite of what we're trying to do here.
And Tom frames it well for those who can't get their heads around the capital costs of building a district heating network.
What would be the cost of paving all the roads in your town? What would be the cost of running a water line to every house and replacing all the wells? What would be the cost of running electricity to everyone's house? Like, that's the kind of scale of project that we're looking at. It's not like you can either have an $8,000 heat pump or a $100 million district heating system. Like, those two things are not the things that need to be compared.
We don't think twice about things like investing in roads, investing in highways that we need to deliver goods and services to our front door. Investing in a district heating system is kind of similar. It's a common network to deliver heating and cooling to homes and businesses. So, what have we learned? Well, I can say we've heard how important it is for the forestry sector to adopt a, quote, use the whole log approach if it's going to optimize leadership in the battle against climate change.
Yeah, and using the whole tree isn't simply about getting more wood product out of the forest, which in and of itself is okay. But it's also good forest management. I mean, ensuring forests, whether they're harvested or burned, are regenerated into healthy, resilient forests.
And then now there's also this new emerging innovative technology that's moving the needle on decarbonization. So wood products being added to the refining process to make gasoline and diesel burn cleaner. Those biofilaments that are being used to manufacture plastics, an engineered wood product that outlive the forest they came from.
Yeah, and in this episode, we also learned we can transition away from fossil fuels to generate electricity at scale. Biofuels have been used to power the Atikokan power plant in northwestern Ontario since 2014. It's the largest biofuel power electricity generation plant in North America, converting from coal to wood pellets, resulting in a carbon emissions reduction of more than 98% since 2002.
And finally, the town of New Glasgow, Nova Scotia, is preparing to put both political and financial capital into a new district heating system for the entire community of 10,000 residents. It would not only reduce the cost of home heating and cooling, but it would do so through the use of bioenergy, creating a market for that underused wood product in the region and dramatically reducing the use of fossil fuels and their carbon emissions.
And just a footnote on the New Glasgow project, the capital outlay will include a significant amount of retrofitting of infrastructure to accommodate the system. Even at that, the annual cost savings are estimated to be as much as 28%. So it's all the more interesting to hear. There's a proposal to develop a district heating system in Downsview Park in Toronto. Now, that would be the former site of the de Havilland operations, and it's since been converted into a federal urban park. For all intents and purposes, this is a clean slate. No retrofitting would be required. The idea, build the district heating network as they develop a residential community on the site.
It'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. That would be a major development to have a district heating system in Canada's largest urban center.
A major step towards transitioning our communities, our lifestyle, our economy away from our reliance on fossil fuels.
For our producer, Becky Coles, our technical producer, and our audio editor, Mike Trutler, for Dave Trafford and the whole team at SSN, I'm Erin Trafford. Thanks for listening.
This podcast series is produced for Forestry for the Future. And for more information, I'd encourage you to visit the website forestryforthefuture.ca. And you may want to get involved in supporting a sector that's committed to growing a greener economy and driving our country towards a net zero carbon future for you and your kids. I'm Dave Trafford, and Canadian Forestry Can Save the World is produced by Story Studio Network.
This
is SSN.